Welcome to our second Augmented Meeting Technology Showcase. Today we are featuring many fine folks. I'm your host, I'm Elise Keith. I am the CEO and founder of Lucid Meetings, and today with me, I'm going to ask them each to introduce themselves. I am joined by Tricia Harris.
Hi everyone, my name is Tricia Harris. I am the Customer Success Manager here at Lucid Meetings, and today I'll be showing you a little bit about the software, and I'm joining from South Carolina today. Thanks for coming.
Nice. And we have Kelvin.
Hi everybody, Kelvin Mcgrath. I'm the CEO and founder of MeetingQuality, and I'm joining you today from Sydney in Australia.
Where it's crazy early, so thank you, Kelvin, for getting up at this time.
So we're not expecting a lot of us in Australian audience here, but anybody else? It's even too early for breakfast.
Right. Welcome, Neil.
My name is Neil Bastic. I'm the CEO of MeetingSphere, and I'm joining you from the Netherlands.
Later evening.
Not too bad, not too bad. It's just after 7 in the evening.
Perfect. And last but not least, David.
Hi, everybody. I'm David Horowitz. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Retrium. We are focused on agile retrospectives and happy to be here.
All right. Now, who are you? So we had just over 100 registrants for this particular webinar, and I know some of you will be here live and some of you are going to be waiting to see the recording later. And out of all of those folks, most of you are looking for something you can use in your work. Several of you are just interested in keeping up with technology, and a number of you are just, frankly curious. And frankly, that's why I sign up for most webinars, so I get that one. So for those of you who are looking for technology to use in your work, one of the great questions that those of us who have technology want to know is, what do you already have and where are your gaps? So it looks like pretty much everyone, or the vast majority of people, have access to web conferencing and conference calls. And that's certainly what we're using here today for the webinar. That's what Zoom is, video conferencing as well. Quite a few folks have meeting management. That's Lucid Meetings' specialty, so that's not too much of a surprise. And then when you get into some of the more interesting, more complicated and specialized tools, the brainstorming and the interactive whiteboards and the analytics, there's a lot of room for growth in your portfolio still. So we'll be happy to show you some of those things today. And then we asked you, what are the key questions or problems you're trying to solve? And the answers that came back from that are really centered around a couple of common themes. Something new and different, what might be interesting to look at was one of them. There were quite a number of you who were interested in ways to quickly generate records, so minutes, action items, decisions, things of that nature. Now this next one was a longer answer, but I went ahead and put the whole thing in here because it resonated with so many of the themes that we saw, and that was about overcoming organizational barriers and making things like, how do you make decisions? What are the action items very transparent, and making sure your teams have access to what's coming out of your meeting so that you can put it to work. Engagement. Engagement's a common and perennial theme. Everybody's looking for more engagement. The ability to, this is a very specific one, but I saw variations on this theme where you can basically build a list and then vote on that and prioritize the things in that list. So using some of those facilitation techniques. The power of anonymity and privacy was a common theme. Now, I know you'll see some of that today in our demos from some of our partners here, because it is, in fact, one of the great benefits of technology that's incredibly difficult to get with an in-present meeting. Solid analytics, also easier to get with technology than with people just keeping records by hand. And then, while we have these sophisticated, sort of complicated things, we also want to keep it fun and simple, which brings us to my final comment that I thought was worth sharing. Real in the room meeting virtually. which means that at least some of the folks on our webinar today are interested in working from home like the Jedi Council. I'm not sure you're going to see that today, but by golly, I'm sure it's coming, and I'm looking forward to that too. All right, so that raises the question, you know, here are a bunch of things. Many of those things are things that Lucid does. Why would we at Lucid Meetings showcase other meeting technologies? Well, just to get that out of the way, I want to explain up front that our mission is to make it easy for teams to hold successful meetings. And to do that, we combine a number of things. Software is just one of the many services that we offer. And our software is really good at doing some things, but it's not as good for other situations and other use cases. So for us to help fulfill our mission to make it easy for teams to be successful, part of that is helping everyone get access and awareness of all of the wonderful ways that you can use software beyond what Lucid does to make your meetings work better. And as many of you know or have seen through our work in the past, you know, where we fit really well is in some of these team meetings and the board meetings and on some of those things. And yet there are 16 distinct types of meetings that each organization should know how to use and technologies that work for each of them. So let's get into that. Here's our plan. There's a quick introduction, which guess what? It's done. That was it. We're done introducing. And then each of our friends here will give us a 10-minute presentation. And at the end, we will take questions. If you have questions, the chat's open. I'm going to be in there just chat-aholicking away. If you don't like chat, just ignore it and stay focused. But if you have a question, please add your question to the question box so that we can see it and find it more easily as the chat scrolls by. Yes, we are recording. We'll send this recording to everyone and then put it on YouTube later. And presenters, I have found my magic gavel, and when you have 1 minute left, you will hear my ding. Okay? And with that, I believe it's time for me to go on mute and turn this over to Tricia.
Yes, I'm going to start my timer too. So I'm going to go ahead and just share my screen. Let's see if we can see that. Okay, so hey everyone, thanks for coming. Glad you could make it today. Again, my name is Tricia Harris, and thanks Elise. I'm going to show you a little bit about the Lucid Meeting software and how it works, how it connects all the dots, you know, between meetings and in the meetings, when you're setting them up, when you're running them, and following up on your meetings. So then I'll show you how we approach all of the tasks, decisions, issues that carry from meeting to meeting. So before I share the software, I'm going to say just a little bit about Lucid. I know that Elise covered this pretty well, but I like to say that we try to help people create a competitive advantage in their organizations. And there are a lot of organizations that already do this, so we model after them. You know, those big billion-dollar companies like Google, Amazon, and Bridgewater Associates, they understand that their businesses run on meetings. So when they run them well, they know they can increase their employee engagement, their accountability, they can improve the quality of their decision-making when they really focus in this area. So not only do we teach people to use the software, but like Lee said, we help people design a meeting operating system, and we build a lot of best practices into our software and meeting science as well. So with that, I'm going to jump into the software. I'm going to show you the dashboard that you first join when you first come into Lucid Meetings. And the first thing I like to do every single day, I jump into work and I go to my dashboard, and I can see the calendar view of what's coming up. I can see I've got some meetings today. I also had some action items due. I canceled a meeting today, and I can see that very quick. I can also access my action items right at the top. I can click on those and see, oh, I have a few overdue here. Let's hide those because I don't want to show how overdue I am on some of these. So we also have some meeting guides up at the top under guidance. I'll just click on that. We have some built-in meeting agendas, the how-tos, because we don't expect everyone to be a professional facilitator. How are you going to learn all that? So some videos and our knowledge base, things like that. And then it's just wanted to mention it's all built into the tool. I can also scroll a little bit more and see some detail. I had a meeting this morning with Paula. I had another one canceled, and then I have another one scheduled for today. So with that, I'm going to actually go to a meeting room. I'm going to use this menu over here, scroll down a little bit. I have a meeting room called the leadership team. I'm going to see what the leadership team is up to. This is where all of my leadership team's information is kept. You can see that I can look at all the people. I can see I have some meetings coming up. There's some action items within this room that people have due or coming up. And I can also see just who I've met with in the past. So let me go back to that. So there are also, well, I went out of the meeting room, sorry about that. There are also some tags that I want to show you in that meeting room. And this room, when I click on it, you can see we've made some decisions in this room, the leadership team. Some things we've put in the parking lot, some things we've designated as issue, but I can also sort these tags, and I like to see all the decisions we have made in those meetings. We can make them outside of a meeting and add them there, but I like to see them, you know, kind of sorted so that we know, okay, the leadership team has made these decisions. We don't have to go digging for them in our files somewhere. So before we start a meeting, which we're going to go look at now, look at my meetings, we'll look on it, at it, click on it, and see that I can see I'm a little bit early. It's scheduled for 1:30 Eastern. And I can also see that I've got a purpose and desired outcomes, but I have my agenda already created. Now, as a facilitator within this system, I'm allowed to create templates. And this is a template I just added a while back. I set up the meeting and pull that template in, and it's ready to go. I can also review this ahead of time. I can download documents. I can review any issues. We have something here called a smart list in the very beginning where I can view this list before I start the meeting. Anyone else can as well. And we could say these are the action items that we have been assigned either within the last few weeks or however long ago. And they're still existing until I turn them off. So let's see. Let me see if I just want to make sure I'm sharing my screen properly. And here we go. Someone's chatting. I'm just trying to figure out where that chat is. Someone's trying to get a touch of me. Nope. Okay. So next I will look at the rest of this meeting. I can see the rest of the agenda here. And from there, I'm actually just going to start the meeting. And in that way, we can see how the meeting goes when you're inside of it. I do have someone, there we go, just started it. And that way, we're looking at this meeting and we can see, first thing I will see is there's an agenda across the top. I can go to one of those right from here, or I can advance the agenda slowly. But we have this smart list pulled in and we can just basically check off anything that we've done. I know this person has done this. I know that Jacqueline came in and told me her plan was presented, so I can check it off for her, or she can check it off herself. The other thing is, you'll notice we have a chat on the right-hand side. I can see who's joined, or if they're absent, I can also mark them present. And so now they're in the meeting, whether they joined by phone or they couldn't join, I can always mark them present if they're in the room. So this step-by-step agenda at the top is important because it really keeps people on the same page at the same time, literally. Keeps everyone focused. And so I'm just going to go to the next agenda item and see that we're all talking about announcements here, and then we're all talking about any victories that we've had. So while you're in the meeting, you can also take some notes. I'm just going to add a few notes here. Say that Fred met with a vendor, save that. I've got another note here that I'm going to add that I need to schedule the next project. As a matter of fact, you know what? That's an action item. So I'm going to change that and say, let's add this as an action item. I'm going to assign myself to it. And that way I know this is something I need to do. I'm going to give it a due date of tomorrow. And that is going to be on my action items list from now on until I check it off. I'm going to add another one too, just so that we have a few in here, and then that way we can see these at the end, because what I'll do is review them before we leave the meeting and get buy-in from the rest of the team that everyone agrees, hey, these are our action items, this is what we want to get done. So you can see that I have taken visible notes here. This is a very important piece. It's helpful because everyone can see it when I take the note, and then once it's written, people can agree or disagree with that that note, and I can just get those notes right the first time. The benefit of that is that the very end of this meeting, I will be able to send out the notes and they're done, as long as I'm typing correctly and getting it all right. This is sort of the meeting science piece that we built into the software. We've built these concepts right in. It does increase engagement, and it also just helps people all get on the same page and understand what's going on. Okay, so I'm running out of time. Let's move it on. I'm going to get to the last one here, and I'm going to make that the current item and wrap it up. Does everybody agree these are the action items? Are we clear? Yep, let's end that meeting then. All right. Thanks, Elise. Let's make sure I'm all set here. And that's it. I'm going to close the meeting. We do have a feedback form here, but I'm just going to skip it. And at this point, now I have my full record of that meeting. I have the notes, and I can come back, see these anytime. Everyone can see what decisions were made. They can export that, and we're all set. So now you know what happens when we run a meeting, and in between meetings, we'll add things, and then we'll come back and meet again. So that's it for Lucid. Thank you so much for watching.
Phew! Right at 10 minutes.
I talk really fast.
Speed landing. Nicely done. All right. Next up, and again, if you have any questions about anything you see as we work through this, go ahead and please let us know in the questions box. But our next whirlwind presenter is Mr. Kelvin Mcgrath.
Thanks, Elise. Let's see if I can share my screen. Okay, so hopefully you can see that. So MeetingQuality didn't start out being about meetings. It started out being about measuring relationships inside an organization so that we could work out what the informal network was inside an organization. Once we had that, we thought we could align the informal and the formal networks in terms of creating structures and so on. And when you do that, what you do is that you take all of the angst out of an organization. It's not fighting with itself, and so it becomes incredibly productive. So the most obvious place for that for us to measure how those business relationships are at a meeting. There's a lot of discussion around why a meeting is useful. Well, there's a whole load of really useful reasons why you have a meeting, and not just one of them is the meeting purpose itself. After we had actually worked out how we were able to measure the relationships, we then looked at perception and measuring perception, and we also measure the emotions that are at a meeting as well. So we take those three things, relationships, perception, and emotion, and we actually then try and predict what it is that you're doing at the meeting and see if it will work. And we give some ways of actually using that information to shape the outcome as well. So let's see if I can do that. So the sorts of things that we do, we measure if a project is going to be successful. We predict if you're going to gain or lose a customer. We predict if you're going to gain or lose an employee. We predict what you're going to get for your performance appraisal results, and we'll tell you what it should be. And we also do a number of other things there, which I've listed in that particular slide. So let's sort of talk about. So here's a map of the individuals in a recurring meeting. What we do is that we give effectively a net promoter score type to every person. So in this one, you can see that I've got a pretty good one of about 80%. I've got some quite good green lines to other more green people and less green people. There are two negative contributors to this meeting, and you can see that they're the two red dots. it takes quite a bit of effort to be a negative contributor over time, so there is something reasonably wrong with this particular meeting. This is real, by the way. We also do things like we change the shape of each of those circles depending on what your role is. So just imagine if the bottom circle was green, that was say a triangle, that would be a customer. And you can see that that customer has a negative relationship with two negative contributors to this particular customer meeting. Now, we'd never just show a single customer. Obviously, we build maps of the entire organization, but it gives you a bit of an idea of some of the things that we do. We also do things like where we have project teams, steering committees, and stakeholders, and we have different shapes for each of those. And so you can see the interaction, or actually more likely the lack of interaction between all of the groups, all of the attendees of the different project type meetings. So once we have that information, we can do some pretty cool analysis. One of the things that we do, we actually go and look in LinkedIn. We work out whether you're a male or a female, and then we decide how you have been scoring the opposite gender. So from this particular instance, you can see I've highlighted a person, and that's a male who has scored 80% on average by his male colleagues and only 30% by his female colleagues. This particular organisation is not too bad. There's no systemic problems. There's a couple of people that aren't on the diagonal. It's not a bad place from a gender specificity to work. We do have organisations where we show that it is a lot of bias, and that is not a good place to work, and it gives some interesting opportunities to improve. I'll talk also a little bit more about the LinkedIn. We take a lot of information from LinkedIn about each of the individuals, and we use that a bit later. When I talk about shaping some of the outcomes, I'll show you how we do that. Here's an example of perception. One of the perceptions that we measure is project success probability. This is a single recurring project team meeting. You can see here the project success probability is that's the orange line, is broadly flat over the life of those meetings. The grey line is what we call the MeetingQuality score. Think of that as the quality of the relationships that are inside. So you can see that most people think that they're going to deliver the project, which is the project success probability, but the quality of the relationships is declining steadily. Now, what we know is that if you continue on that path, that doesn't matter whether people think they're going to deliver or not, you're not going to deliver, because the relationships will become so poor that the project will fail. This is about the turning point where we actually look at it and we say that something needs to be done, as the relationships and the project success probability are diverging too far. Even more interesting is when you have the opposite of this, where all the relationships are really good, nobody thinks the project's going to work. That's what we call a zombie project, because it's we've told you that the project's not going to work and we're not working on it. So. Some of the other perception we measure is about vision and project success probability. I think one of the things I'd liked, maybe not want to take too much out of this, but the left-hand vertical is actually a group of stakeholders at the start of a project. You can see at the bottom is that they have the emotions there. And sorry, let me come back one. And the right-hand vertical is where the 12 months later, where the project is going very badly. We split the emotions into what the project team are looking at and what the stakeholders themselves are looking at. So on the left-hand side, you can see these emotions down here. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, from the project team, and then from the stakeholders. That 12 months later, the emotions are not good. The project team has gone analytical, and the stakeholders themselves have gone sad because they've had their fears realised. We monitor those on an ongoing basis. So if you have a look at the left-hand graph here, you can see that this is a group of meetings where we just started to see sadness emerge. That's a warning sign. We know that when you get anger appearing from stakeholders, and that starts to emerge, and that's a really bad sign for whatever you're doing. So if project stakeholders are becoming angry, that just about is the end of the project. If customers are becoming angry, that's even worse. So we measure this on all sorts of meetings. The right-hand graph is a big transformation, and there's about 2,500 people who registered emotions in this right-hand graph. And you can see the intensity. So the x-axis here is the so if you look at anger, for instance, there are 2 red dots on the line. That's about 50% of anger. You go up the anger path up to, say, here, and you have that person there would be, say, I don't know, 75 or 80% angry. So they're livid. There are a couple of people that are 51% fearful, so down here, and this person up here would be terrified. So this is a very bad score to have, where you have fearful and angry people. One of the interesting things is that you can see this is a very analytical organization, and the communications manager for this particular transformation was trying to capture the hearts and minds of all of the people that were actually recipients of this particular transformation, and was missing the boat because they're analytical. So what we've done is that as we can now monitor pretty much live, so every day we can produce one of these based on all of the meetings that are occurring in an organization or around a project. We talk about how do we target communications to the appropriate people. So we split all individuals into strategic, tactical, relationship focused or task focused. And then we talk about providing communications to them in a way which maintains their privacy in the way that would be best suited for them to receive. Now we have a lot of information about the preferences and so on of each individual from basically our 45-second survey, and we have all the information that we've looked at from LinkedIn. So
Perfect.
That's it. Thank you.
I think we're going to have some questions more about how that works too towards the end, for sure. What cool stuff. And with that, I believe we're going to have Mr. David Horowitz go next. And remember, if you have any questions about these things, which I know some of you do, definitely add them to the questions box so we can get them at the end.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Elise. Looking forward to this. I was particularly excited because at the beginning you mentioned there are a number of people who are interested in a fun and simple tool that helps you prioritize topics based on voting and provides anonymity and privacy. And that pretty much sums up what we do in a nutshell. So I'm excited to show this, and I think it'll answer some of the questions of how do you do that for teams and meetings, especially when you have distributed or remote participants. So let me start by sharing my screen here. And I'm going to ask all of the other co-presenters to join me in the Retrium team room that I shared earlier with you, if you don't mind. Okay, can you all see my screen now? We good? Okay, excellent. So in Retrium, there are a number of built-in techniques that you can use to facilitate a retrospective, although you really can use this for any type of meeting at all. So let's imagine that you are a team who's trying to figure out how are we going to improve going forward. Now, a lot of times you start that meeting by asking that question. What are we doing well? What are we not doing well? How can we improve? And that's very open-ended and difficult to answer. So we instead recommend starting with something called a team radar. And I'm going to pick something called a work happiness radar. Now, everyone's screen will automatically update with the work happiness radar questions. And there's 6 different spokes: clarity, autonomy, mastery, meaning, impact, and engagement. And I'm going to ask everybody in the meeting to go ahead and rate how the team is doing from their perspective on each of these 6 spokes. And you'll be able to see as they do that, on the left-hand side of the screen here, dots start to disappear. And that indicates that they are voting. Now, you don't know what they're voting on or how they're rating each of these topics, providing the anonymity and the privacy we were talking about. But you do know that they're engaged. So this is my personal radar as it pertains to these 6 topics. Now I'm going to move us along to the analysis phase of this technique, which will present now all of the responses to that team radar activity. And what I'm going to do is to overlay on top of all of the individual responses, the averages coming out of the team. So now we can see from this graph that the team has self-rated mastery as the lowest average rating portion of their work happiness. So that's interesting information in and of itself, but it becomes particularly useful when you're trying to ask yourself, how are we going to improve? Because if you know that mastery is not going well from the team's perspective, well, that provides you a great focus to the rest of your meeting, and you know you really can dial in on just mastery. You can tell the team, even as the facilitator, we should ignore everything else that we may or may not be doing well as a team. Let's focus for the rest of this meeting just on how we can make mastery better at our team. There are other views here too. I'm going to show you one more before I move on. This one shows the normal distribution over the average on each of the spokes. Now, it's a jumble of words unless you're a statistician. This is what it means. The curves, these gray curves, like the ones on autonomy here, that are tall and thin, indicate a lot of agreement, that everybody on the team is well convened on a high rating on autonomy. Whereas one that's like engagement here, that is a short and wide curve, is showing there's a lot of disagreement. Some people are rating it really low, some people are rating it really high. So another great way of picking a focus to how you're going to improve for the rest of the meeting is to pick where there's disagreement. So even though engagement was rated higher on average than mastery, it has more disagreement perhaps than mastery does. May not be in this case, but that's another great way of picking a topic for the rest of your meeting. So great, now we have a narrow focus. What I'm going to do is end this particular activity, and let's say we're going to focus the rest of the meeting on mastery, and that's it. I'm going to go back into my toolbox here and pick another technique. This one comes from the column-based technique toolbox, and I'm going to pick mad, sad, glad. So same thing, the screen will update, and it will provide everyone in the meeting, without having to share screens, it's like a Google Doc, everyone can just look at their own screen, an interface to write down what are we mad, sad, and glad about, again, as it pertains only to mastery. That's our focus now that we discovered from the radar. And you'll notice everyone's starting to create notes in the meeting, and as they do that, you'll see this live typing effect to indicate that they are creating notes. But you'll also notice that it's blurred out. So I have no idea what they are writing into their notes, any more than they'll know as soon as I start creating a note. So if I type, I'm mad that the weather is too cold, they'll see that the note was created on their screens, but it will be blurred out for them. And this helps produce not only anonymity, because I don't know whose notes are whose on the screen, but also it helps reduce the groupthink and anchoring effect in meetings that tends to happen when you have a round-robin conversation. If you just listen to the first person who speaks up, typically your rest of your ideas will be anchored to that individual's ideas. So this is giving you the opportunity to think for yourself before you're exposed to the ideas of others. Now these are completely flexible. I could add a new column if I wanted to, but there's some out of the box activities that we have pre-built that we think are pretty useful. Okay, now that everyone's completed adding their ideas to the Mad, Sad, Glad board, I'm going to move us along to the next phase of the meeting, which is grouping or affinity theming. So the idea of grouping and affinity theming is that we should likely have topics on the board that are overlap or they're similar. It looks like there's some gobbledygook here, some stuff that really doesn't mean anything. So I'm going to drag and drop them on top of each other and write nonsense as the group header. We know that that might be important to talk about, or it might not be, but we don't know that yet. But we do know that they're related to each other, so they're a topic for conversation. Similarly, another one here is nonsense there, another nonsense note here, and maybe one more about pizza. So no pizza in meetings, and we have pizza but not pepperoni are related. So I'm going to type in pizza. Now you can expand these groups at any time to see all of the topics, the notes in the topic, but they are now grouped. And the purpose of that is to get us to the next phase of the meeting, which is dot voting. So now that the notes are grouped the right way, we can vote on which topics we think are most important to discuss at a team level. So everyone's been given 4 votes that they can place on the different topics on the screen. And if you've ever done dot voting before, it works exactly the same way. You could put all 4 of your votes on a single topic, like I'm doing right now. I really care about pizza. Or I could spread them evenly across different topics to indicate, I want to talk about a lot of different things, but I'm not quite sure which one's the most important. I do care about pizza, so I'll put maybe 3 on there and 1 on this one up here. Now you'll notice that everyone else in the meeting is voting as well, and you can see that by the number of dots that they have left underneath their name. So it looks like Neil has not yet voted, and the other 3 people have voted completely. And that helps you get a sense of, again, who's engaged in the meeting and who's not, without violating the sense of privacy and anonymity, because I don't know who's voting on what. I just know that they are voting. Okay, now that we're done with dot voting, I'm going to move on to the discussion phase. When we get to discussion, the board is gone. It's been replaced instead by the topic that was voted up the most by the whole team. In this case, it was, I didn't get any chocolate this week. Big surprise, we all love chocolate. I bet the next one's going to be pizza, because always it's about food. Once we're at this point, we have to have a conversation at the team about why is it that chocolate is so important? What can we do to improve our mastery of chocolate? Because again, we're focused on mastery. And we might want to time box this, because a lot of times what happens in meetings is that, hey, we kind of go off on a tangent. The person who's the most outgoing person speaks for 10 minutes instead of speaking for 1. They could have gotten the point across in a much shorter amount of time. So as a facilitator, I have this time box. Now I'm just going to set a 1-minute time box, although it's fully flexible. And I click Start. And as soon as I do that, you'll see this outline around the button in the bottom right corner of your screen, indicating how much time is left as a percentage of the overall time box that was initially allotted. And all of the participants in the meeting will be seeing the exact same thing. And that'll keep people focused on the topic at hand, and make sure if someone starts talking about their vacation instead of what we're supposed to be talking about, chocolates, you can easily redirect them back to the actual topic that we're discussing. Now on the right-hand side of the screen is an action plan. So at any point, if we decide there's an action we want to take about chocolate, we can just write it down. So this is a very well-worded action plan. Buy more chocolate. Very specific, very actionable, very measurable. Buy more chocolate. And now it's recorded down, and everyone on the team can see it on their screens as well. Now, whenever we're done talking about this particular topic, I can move on to the next one as the facilitator. And it's automatically sorted by the number of votes that the topic's received, meaning that even if we only end up talking about one topic in the whole meeting, at least we know we've talked about the one that matters the most to the team. So as I cycle through these notes, you'll see the number of votes decreasing. This is a great way to short circuit the meeting. We don't have to talk about every single topic in the list. In fact, I recommend not. You should instead focus on just the 1 or 2 things that are most important to the team and have a really deep conversation about them. Now, finally, what I'm going to do is end this meeting. And you'll see when I end the meeting, if I come back to the team room URL, I get the view of the action plan. So if you're not in the meeting itself, you always can see what actions you're supposed to be working on at the team level. And on the top left corner of the screen is a button that says View Retro History, which is also View Meeting History. Again, we're focused mainly on retrospectives. If I click it, it'll take a minute to load, and then it'll show you a timeline view of every single retrospective this team has ever run. All of the team radars, all of the column-based retrospectives. So you can go back in time to see how did we do previously, and what did we talk about previously? What action items were there before? So it's a log of every meeting the team has run that's private to the team based on the access list you see here on the left. And I think I'm out of time, so that gives you a whirlwind tour of some of the features we have on Retria.
Very fun, David. It's always fun to get in and play some too while we get to do this. Thank you. All right, and that brings us to our final presenter. Neil, what have you got?
Hello there. I was muted by you, Elise, so it was hard for me to undo that, but I should be here now. Can you all hear me? Do you all hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
That is good. So let me share my screen. So hopefully you can see that, everybody, and welcome again to this session. Good opportunity for us all to meet. Thank you very much, Elise, for putting it on together. And I enjoyed too very much your introduction, where you talked about the various things which makes meetings successful. The way that MeetingSphere looks at meetings is to ensure that at least these 6 bullets are checked off. You know, who gets there, when they get there. We want people to disclose exactly what it is they think. We like people to be open-minded so that they actually hear what's being said and they're not prejudiced by the fact they don't like that particular person. We want people engaged in the meeting, engaged in the priorities being set, building a consensus. And since we are calling people to give up their valuable time to come to the meeting, we want them to use that meeting time efficiently, effectively, and make sure that they get the action items in a timely manner afterwards. when you invited me to speak, you said, tell us a little bit about how you guys came together as a company. And that really, I need to give credit to the original #1 competitor in the market space, a group which is now called Think Tank, that arose from the University of Arizona back in the early 90s and came out with a wonderful academic approach to group decision support software, which is really very impressive software and can do some amazing things. I think it's fair to say that some outside observers may say that although as a company which has changed names several times, they've done incredibly well with the software, some of their partners have left them along the way, getting disillusioned with the company. And I wouldn't normally bring that up other than the fact that an awful lot of those people hooked up with some business people and formed MeetingSphere in 2011. I joined a little bit later in 2015, and our challenge is not just to win at think tank accounts. Our challenge, of course, is to develop a commercial product out of this wonderful academic idea. And the idea revolves around anonymity. We've just seen an example by David of how important anonymity can be, because it allows people to really say what they really think. And by saying what they really think, you can really get to the bottom of the issues you're trying to discover. Our software encourages people to work with the process, so an awful lot of ground can be covered in a very short space of time in terms of covering their results. And it encourages involvement, because people don't have to wait in line to say what it is that they have to say. They can be saying it live time and bouncing off each other's comments if that is what's chosen. And of course, with our system, there is an instant report verbatim, which comes out immediately once the meeting is closed. Our software is designed for the whole range of the marketplace, from very simple brainstorming with a web conference to highly facilitated meetings on the high end, the right-hand side of that chart, where a definitive, maybe complex outcome is required, and it takes the process and it takes a facilitator to get us there. That is really the origin of the GDSS space, and that's how most of our accounts, our big enterprise accounts, operate with MeetingSphere today. And that's really the gist of what I will focus on in the few minutes that I have with you at this time. Here are some screenshots of how our software looks in practice. And I've deliberately chosen these ones rather than some of our pretty sexy presentation charts and graphs and bubbles and so forth in high color, because I want to focus on the fact that we focus when people use our software on the content, on the results that the software can deliver, how people's opinions and thoughts and discussions and brainstorms can be moved through different tools, different workspaces, to get to a final conclusion where people can align together, deep dive, and do a bunch of different things, as I'll give you some examples upon later. For completeness, I should say that we do cover the whole range of the marketplace. An awful lot of our customers are individuals who just simply buy our product off the web, whether they're professional facilitators or leaders working in a business setting with a slightly less complicated product, or enterprise accounts who either use our cloud version or have the product installed on their servers. We also have customers who purchase our portable servers where they don't want to rely on the internet in the location where they're going to be conducting their meetings. And we sell to various different segments, whether that be universities and colleges, or the government, or the military. We're quite proud, actually, of the fact that we sell to the military and we sell to the intelligence agencies, a lot of agencies that have just a few initials to describe their name, because it shows that our software is used for very important things. It doesn't do me much good to really talk about that today, and of course we can't, because that's restricted information as well as having intellectual property behind it. But it does give an indication of how wide our product is used. Some other examples: it's used for government public outreach. In Europe, for instance, when the Me Too movement became very, very prominent worldwide, the Swiss organization put together a complete public consultation process around the Me Too movement and selected MeetingSphere to do that. What I want to do today, though, is just give you 3 examples of how our software is used by live accounts, which maybe brings it to life. Our tagline is very much the words at the top of that chart, getting twice as much done in half the time with a better result. And to show you that, we invite anybody who's attending this particular webinar to contact us or contact Lucid, and we'll arrange for you to have an individual demonstration to show you the power of what can be done in the space of 45 minutes to an hour. But if I give you some examples right now, let's take one of our accounts. It's a company that you all know. Obviously, it would be incorrect for me to reveal any particular names, although I can steer you to our website and you can see all kinds of logos being bannered in a circular motion across the bottom of the website. This particular account approached us from their quality assurance department because they wanted to conduct a root cause analysis in their supply chain. And just to bring that to life, you imagine if you're a furniture supplier and cupboard, a particular type of cupboard fell on a child or was falling on children. That's something that needs to be avoided at all costs. So this particular account adapted the 5 whys process, 5 times why. I'm sure many of you, if not all of you, have heard of the 5 times why. Ask why it happened 5 times and you'll get to the answer. And used our software to adopt that process to be able to develop, particularly using anonymity and using some of the other MeetingSphere workspaces, a way of drilling down and standardizing a repeatable process. And in fact, just yesterday, I got a quote from our key contact given to me. Let me just read it to you. And they said as follows: we cut the global analysis lead time from 6 to 8 months down to 4 to 6 weeks, which made a huge difference, of course. So we're fairly proud of that particular account, and it shows what can be done with MeetingSphere software. Another example to bring our software to life for you in a real setting is one of the big 4 consultancy firms. You can probably guess which one it is. You've got a 25% chance of getting it right. It was their risk department which approached us and asked and selected our software for their client engagements. And it's, again, because our software is able to work with anonymity to get candid disclosure on risk. Clearly, it's very important to know the risk when you're deciding which projects to continue and which to abort and when to do that. And our software includes in it the possibilities to set up some very complicated, complex formula, for instance, in risk to do with impact, likelihood, and velocity, to be able to come up with a risk calculator and to live time be able to deep dive into the priorities and agree as a group together what the next steps would be and how that information can then be fed into their systems team. The particular partner that selected us has written an email to other members of his team that do a similar job. And let me quote what he says. He says, MeetingSphere is a truly differentiating way to run your workshops. Clients respond in a different way. They become more honest, open, and prepared to debate. My clients always want to know when they can use it again. Highly recommend. And to close, one more account. It's a global offshore engineering company that we were proud to win at the tail end of Q3 last year. And I was reading an internal document that they had prepared last weekend, which we got a week ago today. And they were talking about all the different use cases they've had of MeetingSphere since they've acquired our solution, from team integration, strategic decision-making, requirements, definitions, and so forth. And I've chosen them because not only is it a pleasure working with them, not only is it a pleasure seeing the results, but I liked in particular their conclusion page when they talked about MeetingSphere. They focus on the fact of the anonymity, that first bullet. They like very much the interaction. And to close my presentation today, I like particularly their last line. This is a verbatim quote out of their pamphlet. Outcomes are typically achieved in a fraction of the time compared to traditional face-to-face meetings and workshops. So if you'd like to know more, please contact customer care at MeetingSphere, or me, or even Elise at Lucid, and we'd be delighted to set up a demonstration for you with a MeetingSphere consultant. Thank you very much.
Excellent. So that is a whirlwind tour of 4 fabulous technologies to make for better meetings. Let's do some questions. And then at the end of questions, I'm going to put out a poll and let you all tell us how best to follow up with you. So if you want to hear from one of these folks, hang around for that. But let's start with some questions. My first question is for Kelvin. And Kelvin, the question is, how do you measure emotions? So as you're doing all of this stuff, how are those measurements getting created at all?
So we take the emotion, so we have a 45-second survey, and part of that 45-second survey is free format text. We take the free format text and we send that to IBM's Watson. And IBM's Watson, you've probably all heard of it, it then takes the emotion that's inside that text and we feed that back to the meeting participants. So
magic AI robots. This is the future thing we keep reading about.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's really powerful. I was surprised as to how little information it needs to map some of the emotions that they're seeing in this text. We've got some skeptical customer type people who have some really short customer snippets of text coming back. And they're converts to it. They're going, oh, wow, this is amazing. And they follow that emotion that's coming back from customers really, really closely.
It's amazing the farther you get into all the decision-making things, how much of it really is, how do you feel about it in terms of the outcome? Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. Our next question is for David. David, when dot voting is used in your software, is there a way to prohibit people from voting more than once for the same item? In many of this person's processes, they don't want them to vote 2 times for the same item.
Got it. So today, no. The software assigns a certain number of votes that are allowed in each meeting based on the number of topics on the screen. There's a formula that some practitioners in the field recommend, which is just the square root of the number of topics equals the number of votes. And from there, you can distribute them however you wish. The process that we try to encourage is not just vote on the topics you want to discuss the most, but also indicate the strength of your preference. So today there's no way, but I'd be very curious to hear more about why that type of process might be useful for that individual.
All right. Interesting. So get in touch with David if you want to share more about your awesome process and how he might support it. I wonder, Neil, I know in your software you also support voting. Does your software support a way to limit the number of times people can vote on a thing?
Yes, it does.
All right. And one other question for Neil, is MeetingSphere available in more than just English?
Yes, it's fully available in both English and German. What tends to happen is we sell it in English around the world, and the local facilitators put instructions to the tool inside the English language in their local language. So it's actually used in many, many more languages. And for instance, if you would look at a risk analysis exercise in Norway, you'd find 95% of that content looking back at you in Norwegian, with just the basic instructions in English.
So that question, I think, is an interesting question for everyone. What is your both language support and then another question that came up earlier, mobile support? Does that even apply to you, Kelvin?
Yeah, it does. So we have an iPhone version as well, and all of our basic support is actually in English, although we have a Swedish version as well.
Swedish, of course, the 2 most common languages for awesome meetings, Swedish and English. Tricia, do you want to take that one?
Yes, we right now we have, of course, English, but we also have the 6 official United Nations languages as well. One's English, Chinese, Russian, French, Spanish, and Arabic as well. And as far as mobile is concerned, we don't have a mobile app, but we have designed the software to be used on an iPad, also on an iPhone. we make it really easy to use it from any of those devices.
David, do you have anything you'd like to contribute on languages or mobile?
So the main purpose of the software is to allow free text to be typed in, and we support any character set to be typed in. So yes, we support all languages from that perspective. Like what Tricia mentioned, we don't have an app for Retrium, but it is usable on mobile devices, especially as a participant. As a facilitator, it's better for you to be on a screen with larger real estate.
All right. Another question for Neil. Neil, does MeetingSphere support people in the education sector, for example, in the classroom? Is that a use case that you've run into?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, you can imagine college students having a piece of work, a piece of study work set up in what we call our presentation space, and they're required to learn that or read that or understand that ahead of the classroom. And then in the classroom, you would see, you know, a quiz set up via a discussion with sticky dots and ranking of priorities and discussion, brainstorming around that piece of work. So that's how it would be used in a classroom setting.
Excellent. If there was more to that question and you'd like to hear more about it, let us know. All right, here is another question for MeetingQuality. And I think this is interesting. Andrew asks, can MeetingQuality be used to train facilitators and participants to identify emotion in the room rather than just replace their ability to do so?
That's something we haven't thought of before. Obviously, we feed back the information. How you use that is interesting. So the short answer is we don't do that, but there's a feedback loop that probably means you can.
That'll be fascinating. I know that a lot of that analysis is not actually real time. So that'll be fascinating. All right, so there's one more question in here for me. Is there, before we move forward on that, are there other questions for our panelists? Paul points out that GDSS has been used in ESOL and curriculum development. So that's getting back to that earlier question about MeetingSphere in education. We also had a couple of comments about whether the mobile versions are available, not just for Apple, but also for Android. And for those of us who work in mobile web technology, that works on all of the phones that can access the web. And I see in the chat we have a host of fabulous facilitators with us today. So lots of folks who are in the chat and active are actually great sources of information for you all as well. The final question, which is for me, is what's up with my scary masks? So they're just lovely, and I have a theater background, so that's how I decorate my wall. Because as we were talking before we all joined, nobody who does meetings for a living started out as a child saying, someday I'm going to grow up and do meetings for a living. So there's a little bit of my backstory. Well, before you all take off, we have just a few minutes left. I'd love to hear how we can best follow up with you. So I'm going to open our poll. And, you know, we want to respect your time. All of you are already in Lucid Meetings list. So unless you unsubscribe, and you're welcome to do so, you will get follow-up email from us. You'll get, you know, our newsletters and a link to this recording. But if you would like to be contacted by one of our panelists here so that they can tell you a little bit more about what they do and how they work with your kind of organization, please let us know. And then we will make sure that they get your information and can contact you by email. And we'll go ahead and leave that open for another minute. And would the rest of you like to quickly say goodbye, because we have one more minute left and we'll just close this out.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye. We really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Short and sweet. All right, we will be following up with you all shortly. And look forward to seeing you when we do this again, probably in May. And with that, have the great rest of your afternoon, morning, evening, everyone. Hey, you're awake now, Kelvin. Have a great day. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.